Okay, so now we are into chapter 12, which is called Darkness. Just need to open to the page. So 11 was called Dusk, right? So we talked about yesterday, that's the progression of that Dickens is trying to work on to the end of the book. So now we get to Darkness, chapter 12. So in my book, it is page 327. So Sidney Carton paused in the street, not quite decided where to go. At Tellson's banking house at 9, he said with a musing face, "Shall I do well, in the meantime, to show myself? I think so. It is best that these people should know that there is such a man as I here. It is a sound precaution, and may be a necessary preparation, but care, care, care. Let me think it out." Checking his steps, which he had begun to tend toward an object, he took a turn or two in the already darkening street and traced the thought in his mind to its possible consequences. His first impression was confirmed. It is best, he said, finally resolved, that these people should know that there is such a man as I here. He turned his face towards St. Antoine. So there are two reasons why Carton is going to the wine shop in particular, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a sec. So I'm just jumping down a paragraph on 327. So it was as late as 7 o'clock when he awoke refreshed, this is Carton, and went out into the streets again. As he passed along towards St. Antoine, he stopped at a shop window where there was a mirror and slightly ordered the disordered arrangement of his loose cravat and his coat collar and his wild hair. This done, he went on direct to Defarge's and went in. So he's in the wine shop. There happened to be no customer in the shop but Jacques III of the restless fingers and the croaking voice. This man, whom he had seen on the jury, stood drinking at the little counter in conversation with the Defarges, man and wife. The Vengeance assisted in the conversation like a regular member of the establishment. As Carton walked in, took his seat and asked, in very indifferent French, for a small measure of wine, Madame Defarge cast a careless glance at him, and then a keener, and then advanced herself and asked him again what he had ordered. He repeated what he had already said. "English?" asked Madame Defarge, inquisitively raising her dark eyebrows, and this is important, after looking at her, as if the sound of even a single French word were slow to express itself to him, meaning he doesn't understand what she's saying, which we know is not the case, because, oops, my lights went up, because we know he speaks French very well. He went to school there, right? So I have to turn my lights on. He's trying to make it clear that he's not French, that he's very clearly English. After looking at her, Madame Defarge returned to her counter to get the wine as he took up a Jacobin journal, a newspaper, and feigned to pore over it, puzzling out its meaning. So he's pretending like he can't even read this newspaper, right? I don't know if you guys can see this, but I'll move that. He heard her say, "I swear to you, like Evermond." So obviously Madame Defarge is looking at him and thinking, like, this is Charles Darnay, this is crazy. But it's confusing to her, it's throwing her off because it's obvious that he's English and not French. Defarge brought him the wine and gave him a good evening. "How?" "Good evening." "Oh, good evening, citizen," filling his glass. "Ah, and good wine. I drink to the Republic." Defarge went back to the counter and said, "Certainly a little like." Madame Defarge sternly retorted, "I tell you, a good deal like." Jacques III pacifically remarked, "He is so much in your mind. See you, madam?" The amiable Vengeance added with a laugh, "Yes, my faith, and you are looking forward with so much pleasure to seeing him once more tomorrow." So you're so looking forward to seeing him go to the guillotine that you're just starting to see his face everywhere. That's how they try to make her feel better. Carton followed the lines and words of his paper with a slow forefinger and with a studious and absorbed face, again, pretending that he can't read French, which obviously we know that he can. Next page, so the top of 329. "Is it true what Madame says?" observed Jacques III. "Why stop? There is great force in that. Why stop?" "Well, well," resounded Defarge, "but one must stop somewhere after all. The question is still where." So Carton is coming in on this conversation where Defarge is saying this has to end somewhere, talking about all this killing. At extermination, said Madame. Magnificent, croaked Jacques III. The vengeance also highly approved. Extermination is a good doctrine, my wife, said Defarge, rather troubled. In general, I say nothing against it. But this doctor has suffered much. You have seen him today. You have observed his face when the paper was read. I have observed his face, repeated Madame, contemptuously and angrily. Yes, I have observed his face. I have observed his face to be not the face of a true friend of the Republic. Let him take care of his face. And you have observed, my wife, said Defarge in a depreciatory manner, the anguish of his daughter, which must be dreadful anguish to him. So it's clear, based on what Defarge is saying, that he feels badly for Manette, for the family. I have observed his daughter, repeated Madame. Yes, I have observed his daughter more times than one. I have observed her today. I have observed her other days. I have observed her in the court. I have observed her in the street by the prison. Let me but lift a finger. So this is obviously while Lucy was standing outside the force. She seemed to raise it, the finger's eyes were always on the paper, to let it fall with a rattle on the ledge before her, as if the axe had dropped. The citizeness is superb, croaked the juryman. She is an angel, said the vengeance, and embraced her. As to thee, pursued Madame, implacably addressing her husband, if it depended on thee, which happily it does not, thou wouldst rescue the man even now. So this is a call-out, obviously, by Madame Defarge to Defarge, that he would save Manette. No, protested Defarge, not if to lift this glass would to do it, but I would leave the matter there. I say, stop there. So meaning Defarge's attitude is, after Darnay's death, this should end. See you then, Jacques, said Madame wrathfully, and see you too, my little vengeance, see you both. Listen, for other crimes as tyrants and oppressors, I have this race a long time on my register, doomed to destruction and extermination. Ask my husband, is that so? It is so, asserted Defarge, without being asked. In the beginning of the great days, when the Bastille falls, he, Defarge, finds this paper of today, and he brings it home in the middle of the night when this place is clear and shut. We read it, here on this spot, by the light of this lamp. Ask him, is it so? P.S. Don't forget, Carton is listening to this whole thing. It is so. That night, I tell him, when the paper is read through and the lamp is burned out, and the day is gleaming in above those shutters, and between those iron bars, that I have now a secret to communicate. Ask him, is it so? It is so, assented Defarge again. I communicate to him that secret. I smite this bosom with these two hands as I smite it now, and I tell him, Defarge, I was brought up among the fishermen of the seashore. So Defarge found out the truth about Madame Defarge the night after storming the Bastille. That peasant family so injured by the two Evermond brothers as that Bastille paper describes is my family. Defarge, that sister of the mortally wounded boy upon the ground was my sister. That husband was my sister's husband. That unborn child was their child. That brother was my brother. That father was my father. Those dead are my dead. And that summons to answer for those things descends to me. Ask him, is that so? It is so, assented Defarge once more. Then tell wind and fire where to stop, returned Madame Defarge, but don't tell me. And then she goes on to repeat that again. Customers entered, and the group was broken up. The customers paid for what he had. Carton perplexedly asked for a change. And it says that the English customer was not without his reflections then, that it might be a good deed to seize the arm lifted and strike under it sharp and deep. So he wants to kill Madame Defarge, just based on everything he's just overheard. So anyway, jumping over to 331, Carton goes back to Mr. Lorry's, and they're waiting for Dr. Manette to return home. He still hasn't come home yet. So on 331 it says, Mr. Lorry waited until 10, but Dr. Manette not returning, and being unwilling to leave Lucy any longer, it was arranged that he should go back to her and come to the banking house again at midnight. In the meanwhile, Carton could wait alone by the fire for the doctor. He waited, and the clock struck 12, but Dr. Manette did not come back. Mr. Lorry returned and found no tidings of him and brought none. Where could he be? They were discussing this question and were almost building up some weak structure of hope on his prolonged absence when they heard him on the stairs. The instant he entered the room, it was plain that all was lost. Whether he had really been to anyone, or whether he had been all that time traversing the streets, was never known. As he stood staring at them, they asked him no question, for his face told them everything. I cannot find it, said he, and I must have it. Where is it? His head and throat were bare, and as he spoke with a helpless look straying all around, he took his coat off and let it drop on the floor. Where is my bench? I have been looking everywhere for my bench, and I can't find it. What have they done with my bench? Time presses. I must find these shoes. So it's obvious that Minette has relapsed. They looked at one another, and their hearts died within them. Come, come, said he in a whimpering, miserable way. Let me get my work. Give me my work. Receiving no answer, he tore his hair and beat his feet upon the ground like a distracted child. Don't torture a poor, forlorn wretch, he implored them with a dreadful cry, but give me my work. What is to become of us if those shoes are not done tonight? Lost, utterly lost. It was so clearly beyond hope to reason with him or try to restore him that, as if by agreement, they each put a hand upon his shoulder and soothed him to sit down before the fire, with the promise that he should have his work presently. He sank into a chair and brooded over the ember and shed tears, as if that had happened since the garret time were a momentary fancy or a dream. Mr. Lorry saw him shrink into the exact figure that Defarge had had in keeping. Affected and impressed with terror as they both were by this spectacle of ruin, it was not a time to yield to such emotions. His lonely daughter, bereft of her final hope and reliance, appealed to them both too strongly. Again, as if by agreement, they looked at one another with meaning in their faces. Carton was the first to speak. The last chance is gone. It is not too much. Yes, he had better be taken to her, but before you go, will you, for a moment, steadily attend to me? Don't ask me why I make the stipulations that I'm going to make and exact the promise I'm going to exact. I have a reason, a good one. I don't doubt it, answered Mr. Lorry. Say on. The figure in the chair between them was all this time monotonously rocking itself to and fro and moaning. They spoke in such a tone as they would have used if they had been watching by a sick bed in the night. Carton stooped to pick up the coat which lay almost entangling his feet. As he did so, a small case in which the doctor was accustomed to carry the list of his day's duties fell lightly on the floor. Carton took it up, and there was a folded paper in it. We should look at this, he said. Mr. Lorry nodded in consent. He opened it, exclaimed, Thank God. What is it? Asked Mr. Lorry eagerly. A moment. Let me speak of it in its place. First, he put his hand in his coat and took another paper from it. This is the certificate which enables me to pass out of this city. Look at it. You see, Sidney Carton, an Englishman, so this is like the equivalent of a passport. Mr. Lorry held it open in his hand, gazing in his earnest face. Keep it for me until tomorrow. I shall see him tomorrow, you remember, and I had better not take it into the prison. Why not? I don't know. I prefer not to do so. Now take this paper that Dr. Manette has carried about him. It is a similar certificate enabling him and his daughter and her child at any time to pass the barrier and the frontier. You see? Yes. Perhaps he obtained it as his last and utmost precaution against evil yesterday. When is it dated? But no matter. Don't stay to look. Put it up carefully with mine and your own. Now observe. I never doubted until within this hour or two that he had or could have such a paper. It is good until recalled. But it may be soon recalled, and I have reason to think it will be. They are not in danger. They are in great danger. They are in danger of denunciation by Madame Defarge. I know it from her own lips. I have overheard words of that woman's tonight, which have presented their danger to me in strong colors. I have lost no time, and since then I have been to the spy. He confirms everything. He knows that a wood sawyer living by the prison wall is under the control of the Defarges, and has been rehearsed by Madame Defarge as to having seen her, he never mentioned Lucy's name, making signs and signals to prisoners. It is easy to foresee that the pretense will be the common one, a prison plot, and that it will involve her life, and perhaps her child's, and perhaps her father's, for both have been seen with her at that place. Don't look so horrified. You will save them all. So I really like that part. So he's putting all of the glory, all of the accolades onto Mr. Lorry. You will save them all, Lorry, right? Like Lorry's going to get them out of France. We, the reader, though, know that that's not the case, that Carton is really saving them all. Heaven grant I may, Carton, but how? I'm going to tell you how. It will depend on you, and it could depend on no other man. This new denunciation will certainly not take place until after tomorrow, probably not until 2 or 3 days afterward, more probably a week. You know it is a capital crime to mourn for or sympathize with a victim of the guillotine. She and her father would unquestionably be guilty of this crime, and this woman, the inveteracy of whose pursuit cannot be described, would wait to add that strength to her case and make doubly sure. You follow me? So they're going to purposely wait until they can find Lucy mourning over or crying over Darnay, which obviously she would. And that, plus the other information that they have on her from LaForce, would be enough to get her sent to the guillotine. So attentively and with so much confidence in that you say that for the moment I lose sight, touching the back of the doctor's chair, even of this distress. You have money and can buy means of traveling to the seacoast as quickly as the journey can be made. Your preparations have been completed for some days to return to England. Early tomorrow, have your horses ready so that they may be starting trim at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So the whole thing is that they're leaving by 2. It shall be done. His manner was so fervent and inspiring that Mr. Lorry caught the flame and was quick as youth. You are a noble heart. Did I say we could depend on no better man? Tell her tonight, when you know of her danger as involving her child and her father. Dwell upon that, for she could lay her own fair head beside her husband's cheerfully. He faltered for an instant, then went on as before. For the sake of her child and her father, press upon her the necessity of leaving Paris with them and you at that hour. Tell her that it is her husband's last arrangement. Tell her that more depends on it than she dare believe or hope. You think that her father, even in this sad state, will submit himself to her, do you not? I am sure of it. I thought so. Quietly and steadily have all these arrangements made in the courtyard here, even to the taking of your own seat in the carriage. The moment I come to you, take me in and drive away. So the language here is really important. First, remember that he never once says Lucy's name. He's trying to detach from her. But then second, he says, wait until the moment... Oh, wait, sorry. Hold on one second. I understand that I wait for you under all circumstances. You have my certificate in your hand with the rest, you know, and will reserve my place. Wait for nothing but to have my place occupied and then for England. So it's not wait till I'm sitting in my seat. It's wait till my place is occupied. And so we know it's going to be occupied by Darnay. Why then, said Mr. Lorry, grasping his eager but so firm and steady hand, it does not all depend on one old man, but I shall have a young and ardent man at my side. By the help of heaven you shall. So he's, Lorry's talking about Carton, and Carton's talking about Darnay, which is just sad. By the help of heaven you shall. Promise me solemnly that nothing will influence you to alter the course on which we now stand pledged to one another. Nothing, Carton. Remember these words tomorrow. Change the course or delay it for any reason, and no life can possibly be saved, and many lives must inevitably be sacrificed. I will remember them well. I hope to do my part faithfully, and I hope to do mine. Now goodbye. Though he said it with a grave smile of earnestness, and though he put the old man's hand to his lips, he did not part from him then. He helped him so far to arouse the rocking figure before the dying embers as to get a cloak and hat put upon it, and to tempt it forth to find where the bench and work were hidden, that it still moaningly besought to have. He walked on the other side of it, and protected it in the courtyard of the house where the afflicted heart, so happy in the memorable time where he had revealed his own desolate heart to it, outwatched the awful night. He entered the courtyard and remained there for a few moments alone, looking up at the light in the window. Lucy is the light. In her room. Before he went away, he breathed a blessing toward it and a farewell. So this is the closest he's ever going to get to Lucy, and so this is his goodbye as he looks up at the window. And someone the other day in class actually made a really good point where, Lucy stood underneath Darnay's window, like looking up, or with the hopes that Darnay could look down and see her. And so this is obviously a very similar thing where he's standing underneath Lucy's window. My lights went again. And that's it. And then we're on to 13.